Hi there, and on today's episode I am talking all about jargon. It can help you align and also alienate. So how are you using it? Traditionally, salespeople are told not to use jargon and also to avoid acronyms. And there's a really good reason for that, and that's that the person in front of you might not understand what you're talking about. And we've all been there. That's super awkward when someone's saying something to us and we think we really should understand and we don't. And it's so easy to slip into, especially when you're a specialist in your industry. This really came to light for me recently when I was talking to a new member of my team about MRR. Now, I know that means monthly recurring revenue, and it's a term I use frequently with my clients who work very much in this world and are really familiar with that acronym, primarily because many of them are technology or SaaS companies, software as a service. But what that really meant was I alienated the person I was talking to. They didn't get what I was talking about. It made no sense. And actually it meant they weren't focusing on my bigger message because they were still trying to work out what that little set of words meant. Now, every industry has its own jargon and its own acronyms, but the thing is, we just stop hearing it. So my first question to you is, what jargon or acronyms do you use every day? This is really important because by identifying these things, you can actually start to hear yourself and when you're actually using these terms, which allows you to start to evaluate, is this a good time or not? Because I don't believe it's always a bad thing. There are times when this specialist language can be really helpful because what it really does is aligns us with our prospect. It shows that we know what we're talking about because we're talking the same language as them. So using jargon can also be a great way to demonstrate your credibility and expertise in an area. And that can be super helpful when you're starting a new conversation. Way back in the day, I used to train accountants, and guess what? I'm not an accountant. So the first thing that they were sat looking at me and wanting to know is, where was my credibility? So in order to hook that really quickly, one of the very first things that I did was I learned one of the hot topics at the time, which was the Frizzy 97. I'm showing my age now. But the Frizzy was the financial reporting standards for small entities. It was a specialist piece of legislation that was coming through that was affecting accountants across the board at that point in time. What was fantastic was, as part of my introduction to that day's workshop, I used to use reference to that standard and how the workshop was going to show them how to really effectively deal with that with the software we were looking at. Because of my evident understanding of that piece of legislation, that immediately elevated my credibility. And what it really meant was that I was easily able to continue to work with those accountants across the rest of the day. And in fact, quite often people would ask where it was that I qualified and when I had been in practice. In reality, I was an IT trainer. I didn't need to be an accountant in order to support that group of people in learning what they needed to about that software. But what that demonstrated was my deep level of understanding of their industry and their own drivers. How can you use the language, the jargon, and the acronyms of your prospects to position yourselves with credibility within that profession, that industry, or that area? This can be a fantastic way to fast tracking your relationship so that you can present the product or service that can benefit those people. I'd love to know what jargon and acronyms you're currently using, so drop it in the comments. And remember, until next time, to be salestastic.